No one is coming to save you. Not your family. Not your friends. Not your past. Not your future. If your life feels stuck, it's not because you lack motivation, talent, or opportunity. It's because you're still waiting. Waiting for clarity. Waiting for confidence. Waiting for the right moment. This audiobook will strip that lie away. Because the truth is simple and uncomfortable. The moment you stop waiting is the moment your life finally begins. Chapter 1. Accept the brutal truth. Your life is exactly where your decisions have placed it. Not where luck dropped it. Not where people pushed it. Not where circumstances trapped it. Where you placed it. That sentence alone is enough to make most people uncomfortable. And that discomfort is important. That's the key. Because growth does not begin with comfort. It begins with honesty. Say this out loud, even if your mind resists it. This is my responsibility. Not partially. Not eventually. Not when conditions improve. Fully. You have a choice. You can hear that sentence and feel attacked. Or you can hear it and feel free. Most people choose to feel attacked. That's why most people stay exactly where they are. Blame feels safe. Blame feels familiar. Blame gives you somewhere to hide. When you blame your parents, your boss, your past, the economy, your upbringing, you buy yourself time. You delay action. You postpone accountability. You get to say, "It's not my fault," and walk away unchanged. But responsibility does not let you walk away. Responsibility corners you. Responsibility says, if this is my life, then I must be the one to change it. And that feels heavy. Because it is heavy. That's the key. Responsibility is heavy because it demands action. It demands sacrifice. It demands that you stop telling stories and start telling the truth. Not to others. To yourself. Here is the truth most people avoid. Your excuses have protected you from growth. You don't need their permission to accept that. You don't need validation. You don't need agreement. You have a choice. Look at your daily habits. Look at how you spend your time. Look at what you avoid. That's not random. That's not bad luck. That's behavior. And behavior compounds. It's not about intelligence. It's not about talent. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Say it again. This is my responsibility. People love to wait for motivation. They talk about it like it's a resource that shows up when conditions are perfect. When they feel inspired. When they feel ready. When they feel confident. That's a lie. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. It spikes emotionally and disappears under pressure. If motivation were required for progress, nothing meaningful would ever be built. Look at the real world. The person who waits for motivation wakes up and checks how they feel. If they feel tired, they delay. If they feel unsure, they hesitate. If they feel uncomfortable, they stop. They call that being honest with themselves. It's not honesty. It's avoidance. Then look at the person who moves without motivation. They wake up tired and act anyway. They feel uncertain and act anyway. They feel resistance and act anyway. They don't ask, "Do I feel like it?" They ask, "What needs to be done?" That's the difference. That's the key. The second person understands something the first one refuses to accept. Action is not a reward for feeling good. Action is a requirement for changing your life. You have a choice. You can wait to feel ready, or you can decide to be responsible. And those two paths lead to very different lives. Here's where most people get stuck. They say, "I know this already." No, you don't. If you knew it, your behavior would reflect it. Knowing without acting is self-deception. Responsibility is not about guilt. It's not about shame. It's about ownership. Ownership means you stop explaining and start executing. When something goes wrong, you don't ask, "Who caused this?" You ask, "What will I do now?" When progress is slow, you don't ask, "Why is this so hard?" You ask, "What must be repeated longer?" That's responsibility in action. Say it again. This is my responsibility. The moment you accept this, something shifts. You stop looking outward. You stop waiting. You stop negotiating with reality. And that's when momentum begins. You don't need their permission to change your habits. You don't need approval to raise your standards. You don't need understanding to do what's necessary. You have a choice. Responsibility does not care how you feel. Responsibility does not ask for comfort. Responsibility only asks for commitment. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The life you want is on the other side of actions you've been avoiding. Not because you can't do them, but because you've been waiting for a feeling instead of enforcing a standard. It's not about motivation. It's not about confidence. It's not about clarity. It's about discipline. Discipline is saying, "I will act even when I don't want to." Discipline is saying, "I will not outsource responsibility for my life." Discipline is saying, "No one is coming, and that's fine." That's the key. When you accept full responsibility, you stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as the architect of outcomes. That doesn't mean everything is fair. It means everything is yours. Your progress is your responsibility. Your habits are your responsibility. Your future is your responsibility. And yes, that's heavy, but it's also powerful. Because if this is your responsibility, then it's also within your control. You have a choice. You can continue blaming and stay comfortable. Or you can accept responsibility and start moving. This chapter is not here to motivate you. It's here to remove your escape routes. Because once you accept the brutal truth, excuses lose their power. Waiting loses its appeal. And action becomes unavoidable. You've accepted responsibility. Now you must confront the habit that keeps people trapped the longest. You've stopped blaming. Now let's talk about waiting. Chapter 2. Waiting is a form of self-betrayal. Waiting feels harmless. That's why it's dangerous. Waiting sounds responsible. It sounds patient. It sounds smart. But waiting is not neutral. Waiting is choosing stagnation. Say this clearly, every delay is a decision. That's the key. Most people don't see waiting as a choice. They see it as a pause. A temporary stop. A moment to gather strength. A moment to prepare. That's a lie they tell themselves to feel safe. Because the truth is simple. If you were truly preparing, your behavior would change. If you were truly building, momentum would be visible. But what most people call preparation is avoidance dressed up as logic. You have a choice. You can tell yourself you're not ready yet. Or you can tell yourself the truth, you're uncomfortable. Discomfort is not danger. It just feels like it. That's the key. People wait to feel confident before starting. But confidence is not a prerequisite. Confidence is a byproduct. You don't build confidence by thinking. You build it by acting. Every time you delay action because you don't feel ready, you reinforce the identity of someone who waits. Someone who hesitates. Someone who negotiates with fear. And identity compounds. Say it again, every delay is a decision. Waiting does not keep you safe. Waiting keeps you the same. Look at your life honestly. Where are you waiting? Waiting to start working out until you feel motivated. Waiting to change careers until you feel certain. Waiting to speak up until you feel confident. Waiting to discipline your habits until life calms down. Life does not calm down. That's not how it works. Waiting teaches your brain that discomfort is something to escape, not confront. And the more you escape it, the stronger it becomes. That's not a mindset issue. That's a behavioral loop. It's not about fear. It's about discipline. You don't need their permission to act before you feel ready. You don't need approval to begin imperfectly. You don't need confidence to take responsibility. You have a choice. Here's what self-betrayal actually looks like. It's subtle. It's telling yourself, I'll start tomorrow, knowing tomorrow has no structure. It's saying, I need to learn more, while avoiding the first step. It's waiting for clarity instead of creating it. Clarity comes from action, not from thought. That's the key. People who move don't have fewer fears. They have fewer negotiations. They don't ask fear for permission. They don't wait for inner alignment. They act, and alignment follows. Waiting feels good in the short term. It reduces anxiety. It lowers pressure. But it increases regret. Every week you delay becomes evidence that reinforces the lie, maybe I can't do this. And the longer you wait, the heavier that belief becomes. Say it again, every delay is a decision. You either decide to move forward or you decide to stay exactly where you are. There is no third option. Waiting is not rest. Rest is intentional. Waiting is avoidance. Rest restores energy. Waiting drains momentum. You know the difference. You don't need their permission to stop hiding behind preparation. You don't need validation to begin badly. You don't need a guarantee to take the first step. You have a choice. Here's the practical shift you must make. Stop asking, how do I feel? Start asking, what is the smallest action I can take right now? Small actions break waiting. Large plans don't. Waiting thrives on vagueness. Action thrives on specificity. If you want to build confidence, don't visualize it. Expose yourself to discomfort daily. Speak even when your voice shakes. Start even when your plan is incomplete. Show up even when the outcome is uncertain. That's not recklessness. That's responsibility. It's not about perfection. It's about repetition. Waiting tells you, one day. Discipline tells you, today. That's the key. Understand this clearly. Your future self is built by what you do when you don't feel like it. Not by what you plan when you feel inspired. Waiting is a habit. And like any habit, it can be broken. But only if you stop justifying it. You don't need their permission to break the pattern. You don't need understanding from others. You don't need to explain yourself. You have a choice. Right now. You can continue waiting and protect your comfort. Or you can act and risk discomfort. One path feels safe and leads nowhere. The other feels hard and leads somewhere. Every delay is a decision. And every decision shapes who you become. Waiting betrays your potential not because you're incapable, but because you keep postponing proof. Proof that you can handle pressure. Proof that you can act without certainty. Proof that you are not defined by your emotions. You don't overcome waiting by thinking harder. You overcome it by moving sooner. That's the key. This chapter is not asking you to rush blindly. It's asking you to stop hiding. Because the longer you wait, the more expensive action becomes. Not in effort, but in belief. You've stopped blaming. You've accepted responsibility. Now you must stop waiting. Because once you understand that waiting is a decision, action becomes unavoidable. You've confronted delay. Now it's time to confront the lie people rely on most. You've stopped postponing. Now let's talk about motivation. Chapter 3, Motivation is not coming. Motivation is not coming. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not after you figure things out. Waiting for motivation is the most common way people stay stuck. That's the key. You've been taught the wrong order. You've been told to feel inspired first, then act. You've been told to wait for confidence, then move. That order is backwards. Motivation follows action. Action creates energy. Say it again, action creates energy. You don't wake up motivated and then become productive. You wake up neutral, sometimes tired, sometimes resistant, and then you choose. You have a choice. You can wait for a feeling that may never arrive. Or you can act and let the feeling catch up. Most people build their lives around emotions. If they feel good, they act. If they feel bad, they pause. That creates a cycle. An emotional cycle. You feel unmotivated, so you delay. You delay, so nothing changes. Nothing changes, so you feel worse. And the cycle tightens. That's the key. Depending on motivation keeps you trapped because emotions are reactive. They respond to circumstances. They are not reliable drivers of behavior. Discipline is proactive. Discipline moves first. It's not about how you feel. It's about what you do. Disciplined people are not special. They are not always confident. They are not always energized. They act tired. They act bored. They act unsure. And they act anyway. That's the difference. You don't need their permission to act without motivation. You don't need approval to start on a low-energy day. You don't need a perfect mindset to take responsibility. You have a choice. Look at the people you admire. The ones who are consistent. The ones who progress year after year. They don't ask themselves, "Do I feel motivated today?" They ask, "What is required of me today?" That question changes everything. Motivation says, "Convince me." Discipline says, "Execute." That's the key. Here's the uncomfortable truth. If motivation were required, nothing difficult would ever get done. Training would stop when you're tired. Work would stop when you're bored. Growth would stop the moment discomfort appears. But growth is discomfort. It's not about enthusiasm. It's about endurance. Action creates energy. The fastest way to feel motivated is to start moving. Not fast. Not perfectly. Just consistently. Do one set. Write one paragraph. Make one call. Motion breaks inertia. Waiting strengthens it. You have a choice. Stop asking, "How do I get motivated?" Start asking, "What action would create momentum right now?" Momentum is built, not felt. That's the key. Motivation is an emotion. Emotions fluctuate. Discipline is a system. Systems endure. When you rely on motivation, your output depends on your mood. And moods are unstable. They rise and fall based on sleep, stress, weather, opinions, and distractions. That's not a foundation. That's a gamble. Disciplined people remove the debate. They don't argue with themselves every morning. They decide once. Then they execute daily. You don't need their permission to remove the debate. You don't need validation to commit to a routine. You don't need to explain why you're acting tired. You have a choice. Here's the behavioral shift you must make. Stop waiting to feel ready. Start acting as if readiness is irrelevant. Because it is. Readiness is a feeling. Responsibility is a decision. Action creates energy. When you act, even imperfectly, something changes. Your body wakes up. Your mind sharpens. Your confidence grows. Not because you thought about it. Because you did something. That's the key. You don't build motivation by consuming content. You build it by producing effort. You don't escape low energy by resting more. You escape it by moving with structure. Rest is important. But rest without action becomes avoidance. And avoidance kills momentum. It's not about laziness. It's about discipline. Discipline means you don't negotiate with moods. You don't wait for internal alignment. You don't ask permission from your emotions. You act. Say it again. Action creates energy. If you feel stuck, act. If you feel lost, act. If you feel unmotivated, act smaller, but act. Small action beats perfect intention every time. You have a choice. You can keep telling yourself, I'll start when I feel motivated. Or you can accept the truth. Motivation comes after you start. One path keeps you waiting. The other builds momentum. Disciplined people understand something simple. Progress does not require passion. It requires consistency. And consistency is not emotional. It's mechanical. You show up. You do the work. You leave. Day after day. That's the key. This chapter is not here to inspire you. It's here to correct the lie you've been living under. Motivation is not missing. It's misused. You were never supposed to depend on it. You were supposed to act first. You've accepted responsibility. You've stopped waiting. Now you must stop bargaining with your emotions. Because the moment you stop asking how you feel and start enforcing what you do, everything changes. You've learned that motivation is not coming. Now it's time to build the only thing that lasts. You don't need their permission. You don't need to feel ready. You need structure. Chapter 4. Discipline is the only way out. Discipline is doing what must be done without negotiation. No debate. No delay. Say it again, no debate. No delay. Most people think discipline is punishment, restriction, a loss of freedom. That belief keeps them trapped. Because the truth is the opposite. Freedom comes from structure, not comfort. That's the key. Comfort feels free in the moment. Structure creates freedom over time. When you live without structure, every decision becomes a fight. Do I train or rest? Do I work or scroll? Do I start or delay? And every fight drains energy. You have a choice. You can spend your days negotiating with yourself. Or you can remove the negotiation entirely. Disciplined people don't rely on willpower. They rely on systems. They don't ask, what do I feel like doing? They ask, what's scheduled? That's the difference. No debate. No delay. Indecision is exhausting. Decision-making fatigue is real. When your life requires constant choice, your discipline collapses under pressure. That's why people are consistent for a week, then disappear for a month. It's not because they're weak. It's because they built a life that requires too many decisions. That's the key. Discipline is not intensity. It's automation. The goal is not to try harder. The goal is to decide less. You don't need their permission to simplify your life. You don't need approval to create strict routines. You don't need validation to live by structure. You have a choice. Here's how disciplined people operate. They wake up at the same time. They train at the same time. They work at the same time. Not because they feel like it, because it's scheduled. When something is scheduled, it's no longer emotional. It's mechanical. And mechanics beat motivation every time. No debate. No delay. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up and debate it. You don't wait to feel motivated. You do it because it's part of the system. That's how discipline works. You don't rise to discipline. You design it. It's not about strength. It's about structure. Here's the real-world mistake most people make. They try to discipline behavior without disciplining environment. They say, I'll stop scrolling, but keep the phone within reach. They say, I'll eat better, but keep junk food in the house. They say, I'll focus, but work in chaos. That's not discipline. That's self-sabotage. You have a choice. Remove friction from the habits you want. Add friction to the habits you don't. That's the key. Disciplined people don't rely on self-control in weak moments. They prevent weak moments from having options. They remove temptation. They remove ambiguity. They remove excuses. No debate. No delay. Here's what discipline looks like in practice. You decide once, then you follow through daily. You decide your wake-up time. You decide your training window. You decide your work block. Then you stop deciding. When the alarm goes off, there's no discussion. When it's time to train, there's no emotion. When it's time to work, there's no mood check. You act. That's the key. Discipline is not harsh. It's honest. It tells you the truth. If you want different results, you must live differently. Comfort tells you lies. It tells you to rest more, to wait longer, to soften standards. Comfort keeps you average. Structure forces progress. It's not about perfection. It's about consistency. You don't need their permission to live by rules. You don't need approval to be strict with yourself. You don't need understanding from people who avoid discomfort. You have a choice. Here's the transformation you must commit to. Stop designing your days around feelings. Start designing them around outcomes. Ask yourself one question. What does someone with the life I want do every day? Then build a routine that makes that behavior unavoidable. Not easy. Unavoidable. That's the key. Discipline removes choice so that progress becomes inevitable. When the routine is clear, effort becomes simple. Not easy. Simple. Simple does not mean comfortable. It means repeatable. No debate. No delay. This is why disciplined people look calm. They are not constantly deciding. They are not constantly resisting temptation. They already decided. Their energy goes into execution, not negotiation. And that's why they move faster with less stress. It's not about willpower. It's about design. You don't fail because you lack discipline. You fail because your life requires too many decisions. Fix the structure. The discipline follows. That's the key. This chapter is not asking you to be extreme. It's asking you to be consistent. Extreme effort burns out. Consistent structure compounds. You've stopped waiting. You've stopped chasing motivation. Now you must build a life where discipline is automatic. Because once discipline is in place, progress no longer depends on how you feel. No debate. No delay. You've learned that discipline is the only way out. Now it's time to confront the illusion that keeps people dreaming instead of doing. You've built structure. Now let's talk about the lie of unrealized potential. Chapter 5. Stop romanticizing your potential. Potential is useless without execution. Say it clearly, unused potential rots. That's the key. Potential feels good because it asks nothing of you right now. It lets you imagine a better version of yourself without confronting the work required to become it. And imagination is comfortable. Execution is not. You have a choice. You can keep thinking about who you could be, or you can commit to becoming who you must be. Those are not the same person. Thinking about potential is seductive. It gives you hope without cost. It lets you feel capable without proof. But the longer you sit on potential, the heavier it becomes. Because potential decays when it's not used. Unused potential rots. Look around. You've seen them. Talented people who never follow through. Smart people who never finish. Capable people who never commit. They talk about what they could do. They explain why the timing isn't right. They wait for the perfect opportunity. Years pass. Nothing changes. That's not tragedy. That's choice. That's the key. Potential is not an asset. It's a liability. Because as long as you believe your potential will save you later, you avoid the discipline required to act now. You don't need their permission to stop daydreaming. You don't need approval to stop talking. You don't need validation to begin producing results. You have a choice. Here's the brutal truth. The world does not reward potential. It rewards output. No one is keeping score of what you could have done. No one cares how gifted you are. No one is waiting for you to feel ready. Results are the only language that counts. That's the key. Thinking about who you could be feels productive. It's not. It delays the only thing that matters, execution. Every time you imagine success without acting, you train your brain to associate progress with thought instead of behavior. And that creates paralysis. It's not about intelligence. It's not about talent. It's about discipline. Say it again, unused potential rots. Here's the pattern. You start something. You show promise. You get praise early. Then the work gets boring. The progress slows. The novelty disappears. And instead of committing, you pivot. You chase another idea. Another possibility. You call it exploration. It's not. It's avoidance. Because commitment demands repetition. And repetition exposes weaknesses. Potential keeps you safe from that exposure. That's the key. Talented people get stuck because they believe talent will carry them. It won't. Discipline carries people when talent fades. Structure carries people when motivation disappears. Consistency carries people when excitement dies. You don't need their permission to choose consistency over excitement. You don't need approval to commit to something unglamorous. You don't need to explain why you're doing the same work again. You have a choice. Here's the transformation you must make. Stop asking, "What am I capable of?" Start asking, "What am I repeatedly executing?" Capability without repetition is meaningless. Execution creates identity. Identity creates momentum. That's the key. Potential lives in the future. Execution lives today. If you want to stop wasting potential, you must narrow your focus. Choose one thing. Commit to it longer than is comfortable. Not until it's exciting. Until it's boring. Because boring is where progress hides. Unused potential rots. The longer you avoid commitment, the more your potential becomes a story instead of a skill. And stories don't change lives. Skills do. It's not about dreaming bigger. It's about working longer. You don't need their permission to lower your fantasies and raise your standards. You don't need validation to build quietly. You don't need applause to keep showing up. You have a choice. Talented people often struggle with discipline because discipline feels limiting. But discipline doesn't limit potential. It releases it. Potential without discipline leaks out as excuses, ideas, and half-finished projects. Potential with discipline turns into results. That's the key. Here's what disciplined execution looks like. You pick a direction. You remove alternatives. You show up daily. You measure progress by output, not feelings. You repeat actions, not intentions. You accept slow progress without switching paths. This is where most people quit. Not because it's hard, because it's dull. And dull work doesn't feed the ego. Potential feeds the ego. Execution humbles it. That's why execution works. You don't become who you want by thinking harder. You become who you want by acting longer. Say it again, unused potential rots. This chapter is not telling you to abandon ambition. It's telling you to stop worshiping it. Ambition without discipline becomes fantasy. Fantasy keeps you comfortable. Discipline makes you dangerous. You've stopped waiting. You've stopped chasing motivation. You've built structure. Now you must stop hiding behind who you could be and start committing to who you will be daily. Because the longer you protect your potential, the more it decays. You've confronted the lie of potential. Now it's time to confront another illusion people rely on to avoid responsibility. You've stopped dreaming. Now let's talk about validation. Chapter 6. Nobody owes you understanding. Nobody owes you understanding. Not your friends. Not your family. Not the world. That truth stings. And that's the key. The world does not reward effort. It does not reward intention. It does not reward pain. It rewards results. Say it clearly, results speak. Excuses whisper. Most people want to be understood before they act. They want sympathy before they commit. They want validation before they change. That need is expensive. You have a choice. You can keep explaining your struggles. Or you can change your habits. One path feels comforting. The other produces outcomes. That's the key. Seeking understanding pulls your focus outward. It trains you to perform your pain instead of fixing the cause. It keeps you talking when you should be doing. People explain because explanation feels like progress. It's not. Explanation burns time. Execution compounds it. Results speak. Excuses whisper. Look at how often people tell their story. They list the obstacles. They describe the pressure. They justify the delay. They believe if others understand, things will get easier. They won't. The world does not adjust to your explanation. It responds to your output. You don't need their permission to stop explaining. You don't need approval to move in silence. You don't need agreement to raise your standards. You have a choice. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Every explanation you give is energy not spent on execution. Every time you seek validation, you delay momentum. Every time you wait for understanding, you weaken urgency. That's the key. People who win are often misunderstood. Not because they're cruel, because they're focused. They don't stop to narrate their struggle. They don't pause to defend their choices. They don't seek applause for effort. They produce. Results speak. Excuses whisper. Think about the people who are truly disciplined. They don't talk much about how hard it is. They don't advertise how tired they are. They don't ask for credit. They show results. And results do something explanations never can. They end the conversation. You have a choice. You can argue your limitations. Or you can remove them. You can ask people to understand your situation. Or you can change your situation. One path drains focus. The other builds leverage. That's the key. Here's the behavioral shift you must make. Stop telling people what you're going to do. Stop telling people why it's hard. Stop telling people how busy you are. Do the work. Let the outcome speak. Silence is not weakness. Silence is concentration. It's not about being secretive. It's about being efficient. It's not about pride. It's about discipline. Results speak. Excuses whisper. The need to be understood often comes from fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being wrong. Fear of failing quietly. But quiet failure is still progress if it produces learning. Public explanation without action is stagnation. That's the key. You don't need their permission to fail privately. You don't need validation to struggle quietly. You don't need sympathy to improve. You have a choice. Here's how validation traps you. You tell people your goals. They react. They comment. They question. Suddenly, your focus shifts from execution to perception, from work to image. You begin managing opinions instead of habits. And progress slows. Disciplined people protect their focus by reducing exposure. They limit conversation. They limit explanation. They limit noise. They choose results. That's the key. Understand this clearly. The world is not cruel for ignoring your effort. It's efficient. Effort is invisible. Results are not. You don't get credit for trying. You get leverage for finishing. It's not about fairness. It's about reality. Results speak. Excuses whisper. This does not mean your pain isn't real. It means your pain isn't persuasive. Change does not respond to explanation. It responds to repetition. Repeat the work. Repeat the routine. Repeat the discipline. That's how progress is built. You have a choice. You can keep asking, "Do you understand?" Or you can start asking, "What must be repeated today?" One question keeps you dependent. The other makes you dangerous. That's the key. Here's a practical rule to adopt. If you have time to explain, you have time to execute. If you have energy to justify, you have energy to train. If you have words for excuses, you have minutes for action. Stop narrating. Start producing. You don't need their permission to disappear and work. You don't need approval to be misunderstood for a while. You don't need agreement to raise your output. You have a choice. When results arrive, explanations become unnecessary. When output increases, validation becomes irrelevant. And something else happens. Confidence stabilizes. Identity strengthens. Momentum accelerates. Not because people understand you, but because you understand yourself through action. That's the key. This chapter is not telling you to isolate. It's telling you to prioritize. Words do not build lives. Habits do. Understanding does not create change. Discipline does. Results speak. Excuses whisper. You've stopped waiting. You've stopped chasing motivation. You've stopped hiding behind potential. Now you must stop explaining and start embodying. Because the more you rely on validation, the less you rely on yourself. You've learned that nobody owes you understanding. Now it's time to build something that doesn't need it. You've removed the noise. Now let's define who you become through action. Chapter 7. Build the identity that acts. You don't rise to goals. You fall to identity. That's the key. Goals are temporary. Identity is permanent. When pressure hits, you don't ask what you want. You default to who you are. Say this clearly, "I am the type of person who does this." Not someday. Not when it's easy. You have a choice. You can chase goals and hope discipline shows up. Or you can build an identity that makes discipline automatic. Most people do it backwards. They wait to feel disciplined before they act disciplined. They wait to feel confident before they act confident. That never works. Identity is not discovered through thought. It is built through repetition. That's the key. Affirmations don't change identity. Action does. You don't become disciplined by saying, "I'm disciplined." You become disciplined by doing disciplined things, especially when you don't feel like it. It's not about belief. It's about behavior. Say it again, "I am the type of person who does this." That sentence is not motivation. It's a standard. Standards remove negotiation. Negotiation kills consistency. You don't need their permission to adopt a higher standard. You don't need approval to change how you see yourself. You don't need validation to act differently than before. You have a choice. Here's the mistake people make. They set goals without changing identity. They say, I want to work out. But they don't become someone who trains daily. They say, I want to be focused. But they don't become someone who protects time. They say, I want discipline. But they don't live like disciplined people live. And when resistance appears, identity wins. That's the key. Identity answers one question under pressure. What do people like me do in moments like this? If your identity is someone who tries, you'll quit when it's hard. If your identity is someone who finishes, you'll adapt and continue. You don't need confidence to change identity. You need repetition. Identity is a scoreboard of past actions. Every action casts a vote. Miss a day. That's a vote. Show up tired. That's a vote. Act when bored. That's a vote. Over time, the votes add up. That's the key. You have a choice. You can keep voting for the old identity, or you can start voting for a new one today. Here's how you build an identity that acts. First, choose the identity, not the outcome. Not, I want to lose weight. I am the type of person who trains daily. Not, I want success. I am the type of person who executes without negotiation. Identity statements guide behavior. Say it again, I am the type of person who does this. Second, lower the threshold for action. Identity is built by consistency, not intensity. Don't wait for big wins. Collect small proofs. 5 minutes of work beats 0. 1 set beats none. 1 page beats planning 10. Action creates evidence. Evidence creates belief. That's the key. Third, act before you feel aligned. Waiting for alignment is waiting forever. Alignment follows action. Act disciplined while you feel chaotic. Act focused while you feel scattered. Act committed while you feel unsure. That's how identity shifts. It's not about authenticity. It's about discipline. You don't need their permission to act out of character. You don't need approval to behave like the person you're becoming. You don't need to explain the change. You have a choice. Here's what disciplined people understand. Identity is not a personality trait. It's a practice. They don't ask, who am I? They ask, what do I do when it's hard? And they answer with action. That's the key. Stop waiting to feel like someone else. Start acting like them. If you want to be disciplined, act disciplined today. If you want to be consistent, show up again today. If you want to be focused, remove distractions today. Identity does not change in a moment of inspiration. It changes in moments of resistance. Resistance is the doorway. Say it again, I am the type of person who does this. When you repeat actions, your self-image updates. When your self-image updates, your choices change. When your choices change, your life follows. It's a chain reaction. You have a choice. You can keep letting your past define you, or you can let today redefine you. Here's a rule to live by. Never break character. If you decide you're the type of person who trains, you train, even badly. If you decide you're the type of person who finishes, you finish, even late. If you decide you're the type of person who acts, you act, even scared. Breaking character weakens identity. Staying in character strengthens it. That's the key. This is why affirmations fail. They skip the work. They try to change identity without changing behavior. That creates conflict. Action resolves conflict. You don't become disciplined by wishing. You become disciplined by doing. It's not about self-esteem. It's about self-respect. Self-respect is earned through follow-through. You don't need their permission to respect yourself. You don't need validation to keep your word. You don't need applause to show up. You have a choice. This chapter is not about becoming someone new overnight. It's about becoming consistent today. One action, repeated daily, without negotiation. That's how identity is built. You've stopped explaining. You've stopped waiting. You've stopped chasing motivation. Now you must decide who you are and prove it through action. Because once identity is aligned with behavior, discipline becomes natural. You've built the identity that acts. Now it's time to shape the world around that identity. You've changed who you are. Now let's change where you live. Chapter 8. Your environment is either helping or killing you. Your environment is stronger than your willpower. That's the truth most people refuse to accept. Say it clearly, design beats discipline. That's the key. You can have good intentions and strong motivation, but if your environment is poorly designed, it will eventually win. Not because you're weak, because you're human. You have a choice. You can keep blaming yourself for failing, or you can redesign the environment that keeps making failure easy. Most people try to fight their surroundings with willpower. They lose. Repeatedly. Because willpower is limited. Environment is constant. Design beats discipline. Look at your daily behavior. What you eat. What you scroll. What you avoid. That's not random. That's design. Your environment is quietly shaping your decisions every hour. And if you don't control it, it controls you. That's the key. People say, I just need more self-control. You need fewer temptations. It's not about strength. It's about structure. You don't need their permission to change your environment. You don't need approval to remove distractions. You don't need validation to make your life easier to execute. You have a choice. Here's the mistake people make. They rely on discipline inside a chaotic environment. They keep junk food in the house and try to eat clean. They keep notifications on and try to focus. They keep distractions nearby and hope willpower saves them. That's not discipline. That's unnecessary struggle. Design beats discipline. Disciplined people don't constantly resist temptation. They remove it. They don't test themselves all day. They simplify decisions. That's the key. Here's how environment works. What's visible becomes tempting. What's easy becomes frequent. What's hard becomes rare. You don't eat what you want. You eat what's available. You don't do what you plan. You do what's convenient. So if you want better behavior, you must change what's available and convenient. You have a choice. Remove friction from good habits. Add friction to bad ones. That's the rule. If you want to train, lay out your clothes the night before. If you want to read, put the book where the phone used to be. If you want to focus, remove the apps that steal attention. Small changes. Massive impact. That's the key. Environment design is not dramatic. It's practical. You don't need motivation to act when the right choice is the easiest one. Think about digital environments. Your phone is not neutral. Your apps are not innocent. They are engineered to pull attention, not protect it. If you open your phone and distraction is one tap away, discipline will eventually lose. Design beats discipline. Turn off notifications. Delete what you don't need. Create friction between you and distraction. You don't need their permission to protect your focus. You don't need approval to be unreachable for a while. You don't need understanding to prioritize progress. You have a choice. Physical environment matters too. Mess creates mental noise. Chaos invites avoidance. A cluttered space encourages scattered thinking. A clean space invites execution. You don't need perfection. You need clarity. Design your workspace for action, not comfort. Remove distractions. Limit options. That's the key. Here's what disciplined people understand. They don't rely on discipline in weak moments. They prevent weak moments from having power. They don't ask, will I resist this? They ask, why is this here at all? Remove the trigger. Remove the struggle. Design beats discipline. It's not about becoming stronger. It's about becoming smarter. You don't win by fighting yourself. You win by outdesigning your weaknesses. You have a choice. Here's a practical reset. Walk through your day and ask one question at each step. Is this environment helping me or hurting me? If it hurts, change it. If it distracts, remove it. If it slows you down, simplify it. No drama. No guilt. Just design. That's the key. Stop glorifying self-control. Self-control is expensive. Structure is cheap. When your environment is aligned, discipline feels effortless. Not because you changed, but because the system did. It's not about laziness. It's about leverage. Leverage comes from design. You don't need their permission to engineer your life. You don't need approval to make progress easier. You don't need validation to remove what's holding you back. You have a choice. This chapter is not asking you to be extreme. It's asking you to be intentional. Extreme effort burns out. Intentional design sustains. Your environment is either pushing you forward or pulling you back. There is no neutral setting. Design beats discipline. You've changed how you think. You've changed how you act. Now you've changed the world around you. And once your environment supports you, one final truth remains. Even with perfect systems, growth still costs something. You've removed friction. Now it's time to face the price of progress. Chapter 9. Suffering is the price of growth. Growth requires discomfort. There is no alternative path. Say it clearly, choose your pain. That's the key. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid suffering. They optimize for ease. They chase comfort. And they don't realize the trap until years later, when regret arrives. You have a choice. You can accept short-term pain now, or you can accept long-term pain later. There is no option without pain. That's the truth. Discomfort is not a punishment. It's a signal. It tells you where growth lies. Avoiding discomfort feels smart in the moment. It feels protective. It feels reasonable. But avoidance compounds. And what compounds is what you become. That's the key. Every time you avoid the hard thing, you reinforce a pattern. Every time you delay, you teach yourself to retreat. Every time you choose comfort, you pay interest. Say it again, choose your pain. Short-term pain of discipline. Long-term pain of regret. One hurts now and heals later. The other feels good now and poisons later. You have a choice. People confuse discomfort with danger. They feel resistance and assume something is wrong. It's not. Discomfort is the cost of admission. You don't get stronger without resistance. You don't get sharper without friction. You don't get better without pressure. That's the key. Look at the two paths clearly. Path 1. Discipline. You wake up early when you're tired. You train when you don't feel like it. You focus when distraction is easier. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. It demands effort. Path 2. Stagnation. You sleep in. You delay. You scroll. You wait. It feels easy. Until it doesn't. Until the days blur together. Until progress stalls. Until self-respect erodes. That pain is quieter, but heavier. Choose your pain. It's not about toughness. It's about honesty. The pain of discipline is temporary. The pain of regret is permanent. That's the key. Most people don't fail because they can't endure pain. They fail because they don't choose it. They want growth without friction, strength without strain, progress without sacrifice. That doesn't exist. You don't need their permission to embrace discomfort. You don't need approval to do hard things. You don't need validation to choose growth. You have a choice. Here's what avoiding discomfort actually costs you. It costs momentum. It costs confidence. It costs identity. Because every time you avoid, you prove to yourself that you can't handle pressure. And that belief becomes a cage. That's the key. Discomfort, when chosen, builds trust with yourself. You say you'll do something. You do it anyway. Even when it's hard. Trust grows. Self-respect grows. Strength grows. It's not about pain for pain's sake. It's about purposeful suffering. Choose the pain that leads somewhere. Say it again. Choose your pain. Here's the behavioral shift. Stop asking, how can I avoid discomfort? Start asking, which discomfort leads to growth? There is always a choice between two pains. Pain of effort. Pain of regret. Pain of discipline. Pain of stagnation. Pain of focus. Pain of distraction. One is earned. The other is wasted. That's the key. Discipline hurts in small, controlled doses. Regret hurts all at once, and stays. You don't need motivation to choose discipline. You need clarity. Clarity comes from accepting reality. Growth costs something. Pay now or pay later. You have a choice. People who grow don't enjoy suffering. They accept it. They don't romanticize pain. They respect it. They understand that discomfort is a tool, a signal that you're doing something meaningful. It's not about fear. It's about discipline. Fear says, avoid this. Discipline says, this matters. That's the key. Here's a simple rule. If something feels uncomfortable but aligned with your goals, lean in. If something feels comfortable but pulls you away, step back. Use discomfort as a compass. You don't need their permission to lean into difficulty. You don't need approval to choose effort over ease. You don't need understanding to raise your tolerance. You have a choice. This chapter is not asking you to suffer endlessly. It's asking you to suffer intentionally. Intentional suffering builds capacity. Unintentional suffering builds regret. One makes you stronger. The other makes you bitter. Choose your pain. When you choose discipline, suffering has an end. When you choose comfort, suffering has a delay. And delayed suffering always costs more. That's the key. You've designed your environment. You've built your identity. You've removed excuses. Now you must accept the final truth. Growth will still hurt. And that's not a flaw. That's the price. Pay it daily in small amounts. Or pay it later in one overwhelming sum. You have a choice. You've learned to choose responsibility. You've learned to stop waiting. You've learned to act without motivation. Now you've learned to choose pain with purpose. Because the person who grows is not the one who avoids suffering. It's the one who chooses it wisely. You've paid the price. Now it's time to lock it in. Because consistency, not intensity, is what turns pain into power. You've embraced discomfort. Now let's talk about what it takes to never stop. Chapter 10. Become relentless. Intensity feels powerful. Consistency changes lives. Say it clearly, show up again. That's the key. Most people try to change their lives with bursts of effort. They sprint. They burn bright. They disappear. Relentless people don't sprint. They return. You have a choice. You can chase intensity and hope it lasts. Or you can build consistency and make progress inevitable. One feels exciting. The other works. That's the key. Intensity depends on emotion. Consistency depends on systems. Emotion fluctuates. Systems endure. Relentless people do not ask for inspiration. They remove the need for it. They don't wait to feel driven. They show up again. When they miss a day, they don't spiral. They don't dramatize. They return. Show up again. That phrase matters because it removes perfection from the equation. It shifts the goal from never fail to never quit. Never quit is achievable. Never fail is not. You have a choice. You can judge yourself for slipping, or you can return to the routine. One creates shame. The other creates momentum. That's the key. Consistency beats intensity because consistency compounds. Small actions repeated daily outperform massive effort done rarely. One workout doesn't change your body. One focused hour doesn't change your career. One disciplined day doesn't change your identity. But repeated days do. Relentless people understand time. They don't look for breakthroughs. They look for streaks. They don't ask, how hard can I push today? They ask, what can I repeat tomorrow? Show up again. That's the difference. You don't need their permission to work quietly. You don't need approval to move slowly. You don't need validation to stay consistent when no one is watching. You have a choice. Most people quit when progress is invisible. They confuse slow growth with failure. Relentless people expect invisibility. They plan for it. They know the work won't pay off immediately. They do it anyway. That's the key. Relentlessness is not aggression. It's patience with standards. It's saying, I will do this again tomorrow, even when today felt pointless. It's not about passion. It's about discipline. Say it again. Show up again. Here's the system relentless people rely on. They reduce the scope. They protect the schedule. They repeat the behavior. They don't expand effort. They expand duration. That's how compounding works. Small daily actions, reading 10 pages, writing 1 page, training for 30 minutes, don't feel heroic. But over months and years, they separate winners from everyone else. Not because they're better, because they stayed. You have a choice. You can keep restarting, or you can keep returning. Restarting resets progress. Returning multiplies it. That's the key. Relentless people don't identify with outcomes. They identify with process. They don't say, I'll keep going if I see results. They say, I'll keep going because this is who I am. Identity locks in consistency. Show up again. Here's the behavioral instruction you must follow. When you feel like quitting, reduce the task, but keep the ritual. Don't cancel the workout. Shorten it. Don't abandon the project. Touch it. Don't disappear. Reappear. Consistency survives by adapting, not by pushing harder. That's the key. Intensity breaks under pressure. Consistency bends and returns. You don't need their permission to move at your own pace. You don't need approval to build quietly. You don't need applause to stay disciplined. You have a choice. Relentlessness is built by honoring commitments on ordinary days. Not heroic days. Not perfect days. Ordinary days. That's where most people quit. Because ordinary days don't reward effort immediately. Relentless people accept delayed rewards. They trust the process. And trust comes from repetition. Show up again. Understand this clearly. Success is not built by extraordinary talent. It's built by ordinary actions repeated without interruption. It's not about brilliance. It's about discipline. It's not about speed. It's about direction. And direction only matters if you keep moving. That's the key. Relentless people don't fear boredom. They leverage it. They know boredom means the system is working. It means the habit is installed. When something becomes boring, it becomes reliable. Reliability beats excitement. You have a choice. You can chase excitement and reset constantly. Or you can embrace boredom and progress steadily. One feels alive. The other builds a life. Show up again. This chapter is not telling you to push endlessly. It's telling you to persist intelligently. Relentlessness is sustainable because it's structured. It relies on systems, not moods. Schedules, not feelings. Commitments, not inspiration. That's the key. You've learned to take responsibility. You've stopped waiting. You've stopped chasing motivation. You've built discipline. You've committed to execution. You've accepted discomfort. Now you must do the simplest and hardest thing. Continue. Continue when it's boring. Continue when it's slow. Continue when no one notices. Show up again. Because no one is coming to save you. And you don't need saving. You need consistency. This is how lives are rebuilt. Not in moments, but in streaks. You have a choice. Quit and protect your comfort. Or continue and build something undeniable. Relentless people don't ask if it's worth it. They make it worth it by staying. Show up again. No one is coming to save you. And that is not bad news. It is freedom. You don't need permission. You don't need confidence. You don't need a sign. You need to decide. Decide to act tired. Decide to act uncertain. Decide to act without applause. Your life will not change tomorrow because you listened to this audiobook. It will change because of what you do next. So here is the challenge. Pick one action. Do it today. No delay. No negotiation. Because the moment you stop waiting is the moment you finally take control.